since recording the last episode of My Doll's House Diary, I really haven't had much time to spend on my doll's house, so I haven't got anything to update you on today. But what I do want to do is make a start on the design for the rug for the guest bedroom, which is this one here. Now, you may remember that I did previously start a rug for the room. I used a smaller canvas than the one that I'm used to, thinking that it would make for a sort of finer scaled rug, but I really didn't get on with it at all. The stitches were just so small that they were becoming rather jumbled, so I actually discarded that one. And I'm going to go back to my 18 HPI canvas, which I'll show you now. Okay, so here is a piece of the canvas that I've just received from Amazon, and this is called Zweigart Interlock Canvas 18 HPI. And the HPI, as you probably know, means holes per inch. So that means there are 18 holes in the canvas along the length of 1 inch or 25 millimeters. And this is the size that I actually learned on, and I feel comfortable using this size. And I always say, whether I'm talking about rug making or crocheting, you need to feel comfortable with the size of materials that you're using. You know, you can use a smaller crochet hook, but if you're not actually enjoying the process, if it becomes more of a chore than, you know, something enjoyable, then that's not really the point. So you still want to be enjoying it. And when I went down to a smaller canvas and just using one strand of my crewel wool, I really wasn't enjoying it. But I am going to show you the rug that I have discarded. So that's 18 holes per inch. So the rug that I made was on a piece of canvas which was 22 holes per inch. So it doesn't sound like a big difference, but if I just show you the holes there, you can see how much tinier they are. And this is more like a sort of cloth canvas, where I would say the interlock canvas probably sounds silly, but it sounds almost sort of plasticky, if you know what I mean. It's sort of quite thick, whereas this really is like a sort of more of a linen sort of fabric, or, you know, a thin cotton sort of thing, I'm trying to say. So this is the rug, and I must admit, when I got it out of the bag again this morning, I thought, oh, it actually looks quite good. But as I say, it wasn't enjoyable to do. The close-up, the thread is quite tangled in some of the holes, just because I couldn't really see if I'd already been in a particular hole, so I was going over again, so some stitches look a little bit chunkier. Also, I was miscounting with my lines for my diamonds here, so some of them are a lot thicker than others. I'm actually going to pick you up and give you a sort of better look at that. So if we come in like that, do you see what I mean? So all those sort of little lumps and bumps in the stitches are because I was mis-stitching, and sometimes I wasn't even going into a sort of hole. I was just sort of going behind the previous piece of wool that I'd put in. So it is sort of quite lumpy and bumpy and just not enjoyable. And I know it looks as though I've got quite far, but I had that whole sort of central section still to go, and it was just taking hours just to do a tiny section. And I know some rugs do, you know, I've seen some beautiful silk rugs on Facebook. I can't remember the name of the lady now that does some really beautiful ones, and I know they take her hundreds and hundreds of hours. I don't think I could do that sort of intricate work, but I do admire people that can. So this for me was a little bit of a struggle. And aside from that, now I look at the pattern, I think I used the wrong colour for the diamonds. I think it all looks a little bit too busy in the centre, and it's a nice sort of subtle guest bedroom. You know, there isn't too much patterning in there, which I wanted. So by adding this, it's just adding a little bit too, you know, it's a little bit too fussy, I suppose I'm trying to say. Okay, so I'm going to begin now then on a new rug for the guest bedroom. And I just want to talk you through the process that I use to get started. So how I actually begin is deciding upon the size. So I actually bring my rule into the room and lay that obviously alongside the bed there in this case, and sort of get a rough idea of the size that I want. So I want it sort of going under the bed, because I don't think it will look right just having it in this area at the bottom. So I do want it to tuck under the blanket box and just under the bed and probably sort of halfway along the bed. And then along here, I don't want it going under any of the furniture, so I want it to be centralised. So I can then look at the lines in the flooring and see how far away they are from the bed, and then say, right, I want it going from that line and then to that line where I've got the ruler on that side there. So I then take that measurement and then create myself a paper template. So the size I've chosen then is 230 millimeters by 180 millimeters, which works out to 9 by 7 inches, just with a little bit of rounding down. So I'm now going to actually put this into place in the bedroom. And there it is there. So I quite like that. I might just take a tiny bit off of this side just to come along that line, but only probably a couple of millimeters, just because I feel it's a little bit close to the hearth there. I'd like a little bit more room there. But otherwise, yeah, I quite like that size. I think that will look really nice in there and add a bit of warmth and colour into this area where there's just bare floor. So the piece of canvas that I ordered is 50 by 50 centimetres square, or 19 inches square. Now, I wish really I had have ordered a bigger piece, and obviously the larger the piece you order, the less expensive it works out to be. But do bear in mind that when you're making your rug, you don't just want to order a piece of canvas that is going to be the size of the rug, because obviously you need a bit extra around the edges. But even more so if you're using a frame like this. Let me just move that out of the way. So if you're using one of these frames, and this is the size that I like to use for the larger square rugs, then you need a bit to attach onto these canvas strips and then roll around. Now, the mistake that I made with the one for the 1940s doll's house living room, I only just had a tiny bit to attach to these, and then my canvas was becoming baggy as I was working on it. So you need to be able to keep tightening it up, because as you work on it, like I say, it will become a little bit looser in the frame. So I'm now going to attach the canvas to the frame, but just to give you some ideas, if you're working on a smaller rug, then you can use a hoop. This one I think is that 12 inches or, yeah, this one is 10 inches. So that's the next largest size that I have, or the next size down. And I'll actually be using that for the hall runner that I'm going to be making for the 1940s doll's house. And for that, I've actually used the same principle. So I've cut myself a template there, and that actually works out at 10 by 3 inches. So 240 millimeters by 76 millimeters. And just to show you as well, the one that I made for the living room. So that's using the 18 HPI canvas. And I really enjoyed doing this. And I think that looks really good as well. And in, I think it was the episode before last of the 1940s doll's house over on my Patreon channel, I actually showed how to stretch the rug once you finished and then bind around the edge so that you get this nice sort of rolled edge. And obviously that's what I'll be doing with these as well. Okay, so I'm going to attach this so that I'll have the length of the rug running from side to side, and then the width will run from top to bottom. And that way I can see the whole thing, you know, as I'm working on it without having to roll it around. So if I just put the rule there alongside the binding and come across, there's my 230. So I probably want to do at least 3 centimetres or 30 millimetres, 1.25 inches at each side, so that then I've got enough when I remove it from the frame to tuck round underneath and sort of stitch around the outside. So think about that as well. You don't just want to cut it to the size of your rug. So I'm going to get this cut now, and then I actually like to stitch them just using some old wool or something that I've got a lot of onto these canvas strips. But you can use staples. I just find the stitches are a little bit stronger. Sometimes the staples can pull out as you're sort of twisting the canvas around. Okay, so I've got a nice strong sewing needle here, and I'm just using tacking stitches just to attach the canvas to the fabric strip along the top of the frame. So as you can see, that doesn't have to be at all neat, but just as long as you've got a nice strong row of stitches along there. So I'm now going to do the other end as well. Okay, so my canvas is now stitched on and I've rolled the frame so it's now pulled nice and tightly. And I'm now actually going to draw the outline of my rug, so the size of the rug, onto the canvas. So it's going to be 230 by 177. I'm just going to come over here, get that sort of centralised. And then just make sure that the rule is lined up along a row of holes. To there. Just put some card under here so it doesn't keep rocking about. And then I would come across that line by my 177. Again, making sure that I'm going straight along a row of holes. Bottom as well. Just make sure I'm still on camera. And then I can join those up. And again, make sure that I'm along a line. Like that. So that you are actually stitching a straight rug. So there's my outline. So now to think about the design. So whenever I'm doing a video where I talk about Doll's House rugs, I always mention this book, Carpets and Rugs by Sue Hawkins. And it's a really popular book, so you may have already heard of it, you may even have it. This is one of the first books that I ever bought, and it's where I learned everything I know really about rug making, and I've probably made many of the patterns that are included in this book. Now I'm not sure whether it is actually in print anymore, but I know you can get hold of second-hand copies on eBay and places like that, so do have a look out for it because it has got loads of really useful information in there on making rugs, and there are loads of lovely designs in there as well. So for my rug, I'm just going to be using these three colours. So I've got an ivory, the dark grey and the silver grey. And this is Appleton's Crewel wool. And I'll be using a double strand. So I think it's a little bit finer than a sort of one ply wool, but thicker than an embroidery floss. Now I am actually just going to be using or making a geometrical patterned rug, and by that I mean I'll just have a simple border, and then whatever space I've got left in the centre I'll probably just do some little V shapes in there. And for this one in particular I'm actually just going to make it up as I go along. So I'm going to do a really nice border using the two greys, and obviously the ivory will be my background colour. Now because I'm doing that, I'm not going to do up a graph at all, but if I was going to be doing something with a pattern, I would do up a graph, and if it was going to be symmetrical from side to side and top to bottom, I would just do a quarter of my pattern, and then I know when I get to it that I just mirror image that in each of the quarters. And if you want to do something more patterned, you can either take something from this really lovely book. I'm just going to move that frame out of the way. That's why I propped it up a minute ago, because it keeps sort of rocking about. So let me just show you some of these. So you can either just take something straight from here. That's actually one I've made before. That's really beautiful. Or you can just use parts of the pattern. So maybe on here you might like the little rose motif, but you want to keep it simple. So you could just use some of those, you know, maybe just do this corner section and do just a simpler border around the outside edge. Maybe just have a single motif in the centre. You know, and there's so many in here that you could just take bits from. So you could just take one of these beautiful flowers. I think you've got two designs there. Or you could just do this border and then have the centre plain and things like that. Or you can take bits from, you know, several of them to make up a completely new pattern. What I like as well is that she just gives you some borders. So you've got several different borders here that you could do all the way around your rug. It's just such a lovely, lovely book. Stair carpets as well, but you could even use that as a border for a rug. So, you know, it's just about sort of looking at each of them and thinking about what you would like to do. Maybe that you could just do the border and not have that central element, or just have the centre and then a plain rug. You know, there's so many things that you could do. So well worth buying. But if not, if you've got sort of embroidery books or even embroidery patterns where you've done, you know, floral patterns, you can take bits from those and just adapt the pattern to make rugs. So you don't necessarily need this book, but if you've just got an idea of how to do up little flowers using either a cross-stitch design or a tent stitch design, then you can do that. And I am actually going to be using tent stitch, so that's just one stitch that goes from left to right or right to left, but whichever one you choose, just make sure that you're doing it the same all over your rug. If you've got stitches going in different directions, then that's not going to look very nice. So another little tip as well, as I say, I'm going to be using a double strand of the crewel wool. And what I like to do is just reel off 2 arms lengths and just put them in this little pot, so that, you know, as you're working on the rug, you don't have to keep then reeling off your next strand. So I'll do a few of each of these colours and just have them in my pot. And it's just a lot easier then when you come onto your next thread. So what I'm actually going to do before I start my rug is just sort out all of my bags here. So I did actually make this bag, and you'll find a tutorial for it over on my Happy Moments channel. And I made it to keep all of my embroidery bits in. And then I want this larger sort of Marks and Spencer's shopping bag here for the wools. And then I can get rid of this one, because at the moment they're spread over 3 bags and there's different things in each bag. So I want to sort all of that out. And then I'll start on the rug later this evening, and I'll update you in each of these episodes. But yeah, really looking forward to getting started on that and having a nice warm cosy rug in the bedroom. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there for today. I really hope you've enjoyed this episode and that you found some of those tips helpful. Now, I will be making more detailed designed rugs for the doll's house, so when I do one of those grids to create my own design, I'll share that here with you as well. Now, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to the channel if you're not already a subscriber, and I would really appreciate it. I'd love it as well if you'd come over and take a look at my Patreon channel. I'm now doing daily updates over there, so I share almost every day a little 3 to 5 minute video just about what I'm working on or what I'm getting up to that day, and you get those updates whether you're in a tier or whether you're a free member, and hopefully I can entice you then to join in one of the tiers to follow along with the monthly vlogs, tutorials and the 1940s doll's house. So I look forward to welcoming you. But that's it here today, and I'll see you again in the next episode. Take care. Bye.